The arrest in Gethsemane. The olive trees of Gethsemane stood as ancient guardians, their twisted, time-worn trunks etched with the scars of centuries. The gnarled branches arched upward, their tips clawing at the velvet-black sky freckled with starlight. Tiny beads of dew clung stubbornly to the silvery leaves, catching the dim glow of the moon like scattered shards of glass. This dew, cold and unyielding, seemed to mirror the tears yet to be shed and the silent anguish that settled over the garden like a suffocating fog. The air, once perfumed with delicate floral whispers, now carried an oppressive heaviness, a mixture of earthy olive, damp soil, and an intangible dread. Kneeling beneath the outstretched canopy of one of the oldest trees, Jesus bowed his head, his face shadowed with exhaustion and sorrow. Deep furrows marked his brow, a testament to the turmoil writhing within. His breath came in tremulous gasps, his body trembling, not from the chill of the night, but from the colossal burden he bore alone. His prayer, spoken in whispers too pained for mortal ears, carried the weight of a sacrifice destined to change the world. Every fiber of his being seemed to strain beneath the crushing inevitability of what was to come. Scattered among the grove, the disciples fought their own battles with fatigue and fear. Peter, usually animated with unyielding bravado, now sat with restless hands, rubbing his temples or clasping his knees, his attempts to stay awake interrupted by drooping lids and shallow nods. John lingered close to Jesus, his youthful face shadowed with anguish, each glance at his teacher deepening the ache in his chest. The others, huddled in uneasy clusters or leaning against the ancient trees, whispered fragmented prayers, their voices often drowned out by the soft rustling of the leaves. Despair wrapped them in its heavy embrace, muffling any flicker of hope like a smothering blanket. In the shadows beyond, Judas slinked away from the somber scene. His footsteps echoed softly in the labyrinth of moonlit trees, quickening as he tightened his grip on the pouch of silver coins at his side. Each coin pressed into his palm like a fiery brand, their weight magnified by the heaviness in his heart. Behind him, the whispers and muffled steps of those he had betrayed faded, replaced by the deafening tumult of his inner torment. The image of Jesus' piercing yet compassionate gaze burned relentlessly in his mind, each recollection an agonizing reminder of the bond he had shattered. Emerging from the garden, his frenzied pace carried him to the temple. His hair disheveled, his breath ragged, Judas burst into the sacred halls with wild eyes and trembling hands. The 30 silver coins spilled from his grasp, clattering like thunder against the cold stone floor. "I have sinned," he cried, his voice raw and broken. "I have betrayed innocent blood." But the chief priests, their faces carved from stone, offered no solace. Their voices came sharp and cruel, like the bite of icy wind. "What is that to us? That is your responsibility." Their apathy struck Judas with the force of a whip, each word deepening the abyss within him. The sound of metal against stone echoed in his ears as he fled, the temple walls closing in like a darkening tunnel. Guilt swelled in his chest, a relentless tide that threatened to drown him as he stumbled through the desolate streets. The familiar landmarks of Jerusalem blurred into shadowy shapes, until at last he stood on the precipice of a barren field. There, alone among the olive trees and the silence, he made his final choice. With trembling hands, he tied a rope to a sturdy branch, its rough bark cutting into his palms. His voice, choked and barely audible, issued one last apology. To Jesus, to God, or to the vast, uncaring universe, he could not say. The branch groaned under the weight, the leaves above shivering in the night wind, and then all was silent. Meanwhile, back in the garden, the air hung thick and still after the arrest of Jesus. The olive trees, once peaceful witnesses, seemed to absorb the shock and sorrow of the unfolding tragedy. Those who remained felt the gravity of a moment they could not yet fully comprehend. The disciples, now scattered and bewildered, would carry the shadow of this night etched deeply into their souls for the rest of their lives. The betrayal at Gethsemane and its rippling aftermath were not merely tales of human weakness. They were the overture to a transcendent sacrifice, an act of love and redemption that would resonate through eternity. Judas's torment and Jesus's unwavering resolve stood as dual beacons, illuminating the depths of sorrow and the heights of grace that would forever mark that fateful night. Peter's denial. The chill wind sliced through me, a physical manifestation of the icy terror that had gripped my soul. The courtyard was a bleak expanse of cold stone, the rough texture a stark contrast to the comforting warmth of Jesus's presence, a presence that now felt impossibly distant. I huddled deeper into my cloak, the meager fabric offering little protection against the biting wind and the even more biting self-recrimination that gnawed at my insides. They had taken him, my master, my friend, the one I had sworn to follow until death, was gone, dragged away like a common criminal. And I, Peter, the rock upon which he had built his church, had crumbled. I had denied him 3 times. The words echoed in my ears, each syllable a hammer blow to my already shattered spirit. "I do not know the man," I had stammered, my voice barely a whisper against the boisterous voices of the crowd. The lie tasted like ashes in my mouth, a bitter residue that clung to my tongue. The faces of the onlookers swam before my eyes, a blur of accusing gazes. Their whispers, though mostly indistinct, carried the weight of judgment, each syllable a condemnation of my cowardice. I saw the flickering torchlight dancing in their eyes, highlighting the harsh angles of their faces, the disdain twisting their lips. I was an outcast, a traitor, a shadow of the man I had once been. My bravado, my impulsive courage, had vanished, leaving behind only a hollow shell filled with shame and regret. The memory of the garden played over and over in my mind, a relentless loop of guilt. The clash of swords, the shouts of the soldiers, the terrified cries of my fellow disciples. It all played out again and again, each replay sharpening the edge of my remorse. I had drawn my sword, yes, a flash of foolish bravery, a futile attempt to shield Jesus from the storm. But then, fear had paralyzed me. The fear, cold and suffocating, had choked the breath from my lungs, leaving me speechless, helpless, a coward in the face of danger. My loyalty, so readily proclaimed, had crumbled under the weight of fear. My boasts of unwavering devotion had become a mocking echo in the desolate courtyard. The warmth of the fire, meant to offer a meager comfort in the cold night, felt like a cruel mockery, a stark reminder of the warmth I had betrayed. The faces of the soldiers, their features hard and impassive, seemed to mock my fear, a constant reminder of my weakness. I had failed him. I had failed myself. I had felt the weight of his gaze in the garden, a silent question hanging heavy in the air. His look was one of compassion, a silent understanding that transcended judgment. Even in the face of betrayal, his grace had been palpable. A weight now settled on my soul, a guilt that felt heavier than the cold stone beneath my feet. Each time a servant girl approached, questioning me, the words, "I do not know the man," tore at the fabric of my being. Each time, I felt a sharp, agonizing pain as the lie escaped my lips, a betrayal that reached far deeper than the betrayal of my Lord. It was a betrayal of myself, a denial of my own identity, a rejection of the bond that had been forged in those sacred moments of fellowship. The cock crowed, a mournful sound that ripped through the night, piercing the silence of my self-loathing. It was a sound that echoed the words of Jesus's prophecy, a prophecy I had heard and yet failed to heed. His prediction of my denial was not a condemnation but a warning, a compassionate acknowledgment of my human weakness. It had not been a condemnation, but a prediction of my fall. The prophecy was fulfilled. My denial was complete. The weight of my betrayal was almost unbearable. The cold wind no longer seemed a mere physical discomfort. It had become a symbol of the icy chill that had settled into my heart, a permanent reminder of my failure. The courtyard was no longer just a place of interrogation. It had become a cold, unforgiving landscape of my own making, a desolate reflection of my fractured spirit. The silence that followed the crow's call was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of garments and the low murmur of voices. It was a silence punctuated by the pounding of my own heart, a relentless rhythm that mirrored the relentless self-reproach that consumed me. I thought of Jesus' words, his parables, his teachings. I recalled his patient instruction, his unwavering love, his quiet strength in the face of adversity. And the memories of his sacrifice began to flood through my mind. He had washed my feet. He had shared his last meal with me. He had welcomed me as his friend. My actions betrayed that kindness, and the gravity of that struck me profoundly. My tears flowed freely now, not just from the cold, but from the depths of a broken heart. They were tears of remorse, tears of regret, tears of profound self-loathing. I had denied the man who had given everything for me, the man who had loved me unconditionally, despite my flaws and failings. I had denied the man who had called me his friend. I sank to my knees, the cold stone a fitting reflection of my desolate state. I was not the rock. I was the sand, easily swept away by the winds of fear and doubt. The weight of my betrayal pressed down on me, crushing me under the weight of my failure. My words, my lies would forever haunt me. My denial, a stain on my soul, a mark of my cowardice. In the desolate coldness of the courtyard, under the pale light of the moon, I was alone with my guilt, the echoes of my denial reverberating within my heart. The silence was unbearable, the remorse overwhelming. I felt truly alone, abandoned not only by Jesus, but by myself. Then, a glimmer of hope flickered. In the depth of despair, in the cold stillness, I felt a flicker of something else, a small spark of grace. The shame was still sharp, the regret still cutting, but along with it, a slow, agonizing awareness, a profound awareness of God's mercy. The crow's call was not merely a symbol of my failure, but also a reminder of the promise of forgiveness. The cold of the courtyard was not only the cold of betrayal, but also the cold that precedes the warmth of redemption. My tears were not only tears of sorrow, but also the beginning of repentance. My denial had been complete, but now so was my recognition of my desperate need for forgiveness. The weight of my betrayal remained, a heavy burden I would carry for the rest of my days. But even in that weight, I found a new purpose, a newfound resolve to atone for my failings, to live a life worthy of the love and forgiveness I had so undeservedly received. The night was far from over, but in the depths of my despair, the dawn of a new understanding had begun to break. The path ahead would be long and arduous, but it was a path I would walk, strengthened by the memory of my betrayal and fueled by the hope of redemption. The courtyard remained cold, but in my heart, a different kind of warmth began to glow, a warmth of hope born from the ashes of my shame.